live stream itself to actually catch up. And yeah, it's an amazing day. I feel great. I got up really early this morning to start working on the project. Let's see. Okay. Okay, I'm just actually testing sound here. So if everyone could let me know, and we're just going to take a minute to get the show started today because obviously we're a little bit, well, I won't say we're late. There's not any set times for the shows here that we're going to have in the future. It's just going to be based on how fast I can get things together and hooked up and ready to show everyone because, of course, I want to do very comprehensive studies on the topics that we're going to be covering. I also want to get some light going on in here, so give me just a moment. Everything looks clear, so it looks like you'll be able to see things properly. Let me go ahead and get this other camera shut on. And again, I'm going to notify everyone in the chat box that we have started, or Keyshawn, if you could do that, that would be great. And then we're going to give a moment for everyone to just kind of get on to the actual live stream and to get tuned in. So let me get our recorder started. Okay, now you should be getting audio in 2 ears, and I'll just figure out how I'm going to deal with that mic in a little bit because that's a mono mic. Okay, so can everyone now hear me in both ears? Let me, okay, great, awesome. What I did do is I actually installed the thing that's going to allow us to do group chats. We're going to begin that tonight. Obviously, I'm going to have to figure out how to get my audio off of mono, but I'll just throw in another mic and we'll be able to handle it like that. So again, let me start this by starting everything with a video. But before I do that, because we're definitely going to get deep into frequency today, I'm going to go ahead and let everyone know what they should be doing on their cleanse. Obviously, I'm on day 1 of 5. A lot of people are on day 4 of 5, so at least we're now on that same segment. And of course, all the information is the same, which is that we'll be taking these toxin absorbers the first time you wake up, and then after that, every 3 hours. So it's good to set a timer. You'll also be taking your digestive stimulator number 2 hours after your toxin absorber tonight. And of course, for those who are using the best option, we've now gotten rid of food, so you'll be juicing. So if you feel the urge that you're not getting enough energy or et cetera, then now you're going to have to refer to the juicing options. Probably tomorrow we'll be juicing a couple things just to mix up some stuff that people can stay nourished with and also may not taste as bad. That just keeps them going along the way. And of course, those who are on day 4 or 5, you're going to do the exact same thing that we're doing. So that's pretty much what we have for just what people need to be doing with the cleanse. So let's go ahead and get this first video started, which is basically a quick TED Talks that most people have heard already, but it's in regards to cymatics, because of course we're talking about frequency today. I have a couple more things to get ready in the studio, so it actually helps me out because I can show this while I'm finishing up a couple things. So let me just see where that outlet is. Okay, I found it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch to that, and then when we get started, everyone, we're going to be talking about exactly what's here on the table. Let me show you a quick image of that. And so you can see we have some weapons grade frequency devices and also some standard frequency devices. We have the Shalandi plate, some vortex imprinting, some tuning forks, etc., and even some synthesizers. So we're going to be talking about, the pros and cons of organic and inorganic sound, the limitations, the carriers, etc. So we're going to get into it on a deep level. But like I said, I just need to prep up a couple things before we get started, mainly some of this equipment. Okay. All right, I was able to get everything set up. It's been quite interesting. If you could see the front of the studio right now, you would see exactly how much stuff is really out here and how many things have been plugged up since this morning. It's interesting how many wires and cords and cables and stuff that has to go to all these different devices in order to get something like this to work. All right. All right, I was just checking in the chat box here just to make sure everyone's still connected. Someone says they're feeling really hungry. And again, that is the battle that you face with the body, which is getting it getting the mind over matter actually in place. And of course, we're going to talk about matter here and the mind over matter. So this will take your mind off of the hunger. Because remember, what happens is with the body when it makes its demands, that's going to be based on one of our frequency devices here telling us it wants to be cut off. So what happens is that we're going to talk about mass today, since someone says, okay, I'm hungry. Okay? And then we're going to also talk about this ethereal. All right? People have different, we'll spell it like that today. Some people spell it with AE or whatever. Okay, so what you have here now, let's take the body. Okay? And this is about as much as the drawing you'll get out of me. And then down here you have what is known as the mass frequency. And up here you have the ethereal frequency. Okay? And the center of the body is the navel. Okay? Which is slightly above the waistline. So what happens is that how frequency works, because we're talking about frequency today, we're going to have to talk about light on another day. We're going to be talking about crystals tomorrow. But what happens is that with your body is seeing through different eyes, like my shirt is. And these different eyes see on the plane or frequency that they're actually on. And I'm not going to be able to put numbers here for people today. If you want to go by solfeggio, you can go by solfeggio. Really, you have what's called harmonics here, harmonic wavelengths in spirals. So each chakra that you're talking about, let's take, for instance, this chakra here, all of the wavelengths that create this chakra, and then we'll just say, let's start from 128 hertz and go all the way to, let's say, 1080 hertz, okay? Let's just say that. That will be one whole harmonic wavelength, basically one world, one layer, okay? And then when you get to the next chakra center, you have numbers, if you understand music, that are on the same octave, but the numbers are different. So this may be 568 all the way to 2,513. Who knows? Like I said, the numbers is not going to do you as much justice as just understanding the concept of what you're talking about. So because of that, this eye is allowed to see into this world. So if a person is primarily this chakra here, make sure everyone can hear me. Also, let me make sure this recording is on. I can hear myself. And let me just look in the chat box and turn this on. Okay, you'll hear a little bit of reverb for a second there. I just had to check to make sure that we're actually recording, because you know it happens sometimes. It happened yesterday when we were doing the big water test. So what you're dealing with here is now you're understanding this hyperdimensional being, because this being is really a universe, and universes within universes. They were telling you about this whole what they call a holographic nature, where each part contains the image of the whole. And so on each level, you got levels of entities of different intelligence existing in harmonics, and then that completes one world. So what happens is you have multiple worlds. Now, some people say you have 7 worlds, and this, of course, is the basic, this solar system template, which gives you a moon, a sun, and 5 other planets. That's the other people need to think, that the 7 days of the week are not just 7 planets. Actually, it's one planet, one moon, one sun. Of course, that's Sunday. For anyone wanting to understand how am I coming up with this type of theory, this is Monday, or the moon, and this is the sun. And then twos and winds, and anybody that does this stuff, astrology or whatever, they can tell you all the days, and we have charts. But you understand how it works. So the actual ritual that is being conducted here on the planet is in this 7-fold structure, but that 7-fold includes the moon and the sun. And if you understood the other names for planets, like let's say, for instance, Neptune, if you understood the real element to Neptune, then you would see it as elements, like the sun. See, you understand what the sun does because you seem to need that the most, because it's in your external reality and it gives you heat. So you know what a sun does, right? And then with the moon, most people who do vegetation and crops and things like that, they know what a moon can do. But do they know what a Neptune or what a Saturn or these other planets can do? And that's also called the hidden mysteries. They love it. No one knows. Is supposed to know about what goes on in the other planets. They cannot see that far. See, there is, of course, an agenda on the planet where the entities are saying, well, humans cannot see that far. They must be debased. They must not be given the vision, the third eye. They must not be given the tree of life. They must not be given, all these rules and structures and all that, which are basically killing us. So either way, it would either be a slow death, or, of course, this is a mental death, and that feeds over into a spiritual death, because you really can't die. You can be, again, limited or debased or lied to or etc., tricked, etc. So let me just get into this so you'll see how when we project, we utilize the material that we have access to that works with that frequency, meaning that down here in these frequencies, there's of course 2 minor chakras in the knees, obviously chakras at the ankles. Chakras are wheels, so wherever you find bends at, there would be a chakra there. It's kind of like, it really makes a lot of sense when you start thinking about it. There's even popping in the chakras. Like these are the worlds within worlds. And even when you take the face and you just remove the head, this is one phi-based skull with different worlds and things inside of it. So there's a lot of power to what we are if you understand it. So this is also what happens when someone has activated a lower chakra and they can see into the mass world, right? This is where they're seeing it. And so anything they predict is going to be from the physical mass material subject to decay area. So you also, of course, have the individuals that see from the ethereal level, okay? And then, of course, most of what they predict is very expansive and enlightened and sometimes not even realistic if you're actually primarily into this state of thought, right? So this is also why, just as the ideas from these individuals down here don't make sense to this individual here in this state of consciousness, we were even told that we had the ability to run circuits, that we could run through worlds, basically. That's what all the knowledge ends up revealing after you spend years and years, such as myself, looking through it, that you had this ability to go through worlds, and anytime you ended up in a world, to make sure you never got stuck, you always were still in a vehicle that could accomplish this. And that's why even today in the organic frequencies, some of the insects are able to accomplish high harmonics because their body is designed to do that when they give off this sound at night. So our body, in the same sense, is designed to do that, except it's powered down. Do you not know that when the human body is powered up, that it actually emits a frequency that became known to these lower vibratory beings as a frequency that they could not stand, to hear? Let me turn this camera on, just to have another backup, because this is good stuff. Now, remember they talk about that mankind was making so much noise and the gods got upset, blah, blah, blah. What this was about is mankind, woman, etc., the humanoid species, those endowed with the chakras and experiences of worlds, when these worlds come online, it's a high frequency. So anything on a low frequency, it basically disintegrates. Now, some people think it's disintegration. Actually, let me correct that. Okay, because that's disintegrate, right? But what it actually does is it harmonizes it. Okay? So now, let's say, for instance, this frequency is 20 million hertz, okay? And then you got somebody sitting on, 2 hertz. When these come together, there's still a middle point. And so this is also how the bridge building takes place, also mentally, physically, spiritually, if you want to understand these dynamics, is that you have to understand what is in between both of these worlds. This is where, in order to be able to go throughout worlds without hindrance, you need to be able to go through all these worlds and frequencies And it's normal for you. There's no reflection in a sense, meaning there's no judgment going on with the world. Now, all of us have been, in a sense, and especially myself, right in the Golden Matrix is the epitome of that, have been in states where in not seeing completely what's going on, you miss the obvious sometimes, right? But you do the best job that you can if you're serious to really, really understand what is happening and what's going on. But don't be surprised if in 2 years from now, you believe completely different to what you believe now. Why? Because as you're expanding and you're getting more eyes and things are opening up more so you can see everything more, you'll realize some of the things that you were looking at were based on what chakra you were looking from. See, at least I could come to you today and give you the information that people who see from certain chakras only see things certain ways. Those who are actually fully activated see things all ways. You see what I mean? It's totally different than being stuck on a ladder, because this ends up becoming in the Hebraic lore and the Abrahamic lore and the Brahmic lore. This becomes the ladder. And you'll see even pictures where they show these angels ascending and descending the ladder, right? And these angels have this ability to do this. So what you're looking at, even when you're talking about angels, gods, you're talking about nothing but the more expansive, powerful human creation. The actual creation that we're still inside of, but we've been led very far from. Meaning, if you could see this as a map of some sort, you would see yourself being led away from yourself over into another system of belief. And so this is, a really good diagram for you to see what's going on, because if you choose, obviously there's a seat here in the crown kingdom of your head, and there's a higher self that sits here, obviously, and whispers to do the right thing, because it already understands what to do, or it wouldn't have got there. You see, people don't get what's actually happening, but if you can say you have a higher self, it means you already expanded. Even if you could say you're in a human body, it means you already expanded. What we're dealing with is that forgetfulness, the klipo, the shell, the stasis, right? So what happens here is that now you can project this entity, okay? This was known as a Ran, okay, in the ancient texts. And because this was all that solar stuff that those people were believing in, this was Ra. He had his rays. He sent his rays as seeds, and they ran, meaning to go forth or go to, and then they came from the sky, which is, of course, what An means. That's where they get the word Anunnaki. And then, of course, you get the R, which is the number 9. So it's in itself, number 18, which breaks down to the number 9. In itself, it's if you understand all the etymology and things behind stuff, you can pull things like that apart. But if you don't, you end up worshiping things like that. Just worshiping another form of self. This is no different than being in external reality on one at MTV Awards. It doesn't make a difference. If you're worshiping only a part of yourself, then you're not seeing full spectrum. So what happens here is that you can project this guy. In fact, there's multiple guys and gals to project, meaning we can do this as human beings. And if you want to know what is the physical version of this, it's from the male's penis, how many actual semen do project down into the wormholes, into the tunnels, and become incarnated onto other worlds. Okay? Because it's like you are a tree. That's why this was originally, they call this now the Sephiroth or whatever they're talking about, but this is just a simple diagram of how it was working. So you had this ability to also externally project yourself. It was as if things weren't great enough. And you could, in being a tree, shin the seed of yourself, which was still you. There was no disconnection there. That's what a lot of people are missing, that the only thing that's different than us being the all is just the perception of disconnection. We're still connected, or else we will fall on the ground right now. So what's happening is that as this entity, which we are, is spitting out all these multiple versions of selves, all of them are linking still to themselves. That is the hive. That's why when you go to sleep, you see yourself acting out and doing different things, but still failing to find a mirror in that world most of the time so that you can see that you're not necessarily this version of, in this case, I've showed up as James. So as you see, there's another deeper level of knowledge to this, and I'm going to need to grab some tissue here, so let me grab it. But basically what this knowledge entails is the manifestations on different levels and how it is possible. Because realistically, you're still dealing with densities. So unless you have access to certain densities, when you try to create something on planes, you have to understand what materials in which to use so you understand how to construct it. Obviously, on the higher planes, things are constructed with light. Obviously, once you get to a certain point, things are constructed with sound. Sound, which we're talking about today in frequency, is invisible. So in many cases, people have not been able to really see what is going on with sound so that they can start to believe, because on a planet where seeing is believing, that the entire spectrum that we're sitting on is made up out of one frequency. Once you start oscillating and changing your frequency, you become shapeshifter. Not the reptilian one, the one that actually understands that each of these harmonics and vibratory wavelengths actually spit out a certain design. We could never draw it. See, if it'd be the closest thing to it would be one of those mandala sand paintings, but that's to a specific world. It would never be as rudimentary as something like this. Do you see what I mean? The geometry behind it would be so complex, you can actually catch a glimpse of it when you use something like cymatics software and then you spit the program into, I think we tested out like 7,000 hertz or something way up there, and then it spits back a pattern, and then you just see basically worlds within worlds. So just because we're limited doesn't mean that whatever created things, which was definitely ourselves at some point, was limited. This is the interesting part of creation, which most people have collapsed their mind trying to figure out why it's taking place. Meaning, why such an intelligent being to go and do what appears to be so silly? But it's not. Meaning that every time you increase yourself, that's what this whole thing is about, is that every time you go into worlds of darkness, of course is ignorance in a darker state of mind, then it gives you the opportunity to actually start your own self up again. You see what I mean? It's like when you plug in another part of self, and this is again somewhat of a riddle, but when you plug in another part of self, it's like you remember. It's like, oh man, I got a member of myself back. So this also ends up coming out into our physical world. I want to let everyone know that also, that this coming together inside, which is a major part of what this cleanse is about, actually leads to, in the external reality, getting with individuals that are vibrating at the frequency that you're on, or at least at its bridge. So that way you can help them expand, because this stuff is not, like we talked about yesterday, it doesn't need you to believe in it. It's the truth. You'll find it everywhere. If you want to accept it or not, that's going to be determined by exactly your experiences in this world. So if a lot of things have happened to you in life, you have a great opportunity also to free up a lot of the anchors, and we'll talk about that. Because you wouldn't have come into this level of total realization if you start moving things around in the past. So all that happened to you in the past, you got to learn that was what took place that was necessary to get you to this point. That was your projection. So what happens here is that now for you to move through this, you have to, as a ship, bring up your anchor. Okay? Now here's how the anchors work. Let's say in anger, notice how anger and anchor are the same word. In anger, which is a lower vibratory frequency, some situations occurred in this world. Okay? The worlds of low vibration. They're just another harmonic that's still laid out exactly to the higher harmonics, but not allowed in that octave. That's why you have to understand the octaves and the wavelengths in order for you to see how something that appears to be so separate could still work together. So right here you have this anger thing going on, right? And then now there's these anchors here. Okay? So what happens is when you get anywhere near, and it definitely generally doesn't happen. An anchor has a very short chain. So the most you may make it is into this next chakra before during at least the full moon, something will come up, as it's like a residue, because this is a seed in itself. Something will come up and grow, and then you'll confront it. And then each time you confront it, it'll take you back down to that frequency again, because the angers are anchors. So all of the situation, I used to call them the scars. You know, this is the serpent scars, or the serpent arc, the serpent's car. Okay, what's going on in the dimension with abuse. And when that scars someone, it sometimes leaves a mark, and that mark becomes like a seal for them, where they get stuck in certain worlds. So you could see why worlds are similar to vacuums and vortexes, because you can get sucked down the drain in worlds. And you can see it's happening in our reality right now. Certain things are being suggested to humans, and it has nothing to do with this the plasmic cosmos quester, but everything to do with sliding down the back drain, as they're calling it, the tunnels of Set. You know, set up. Okay, this is what they got going on all the time. They're set up. Okay, because they glorify the death. They glorify the nighttime, nocturnal. So this is why, because everyone on this line, because you would pretty much blow out most of these units, especially the electrical stuff, if you don't really understand what the prana is about. Like, it doesn't even interact well with electronics. It blows things out. So most people on the line are not at the level of energy yet to be able to project things, especially instantaneously, which are from these harmonic fields, because they don't have enough energy. So now it's not just energy also, it's also understanding. Like, you can have an immense amount of energy and then expel it on something that gives you nothing back. And that's happened before. A lot of people have done that on multiple levels. So what we're saying is that there is a mind, a body, and a soul. And if anyone is to introduce anything that actually is going to fix the human, they're going to need to explain it on those three levels. So you're going to have for the body the cleanse of physically cleaning out all the organs, while you have for the mind the actual information of how it all is put together and really works, so like black and white, so that the soul can basically be free. See, this is not, the interesting thing is, and that's why I say, once you understand how to control the soul, you'll see it's far more powerful than the mind and the body. But the mind, it has power over the body. But notice how the different stages that you can move into, because this is almost like the mind, the body, and then the mind, and then the soul, okay, of the human being. Some people will swap these and say the soul's really in the heart, and the seat, it's in the solar. That may be true. So we'll just say, okay, whichever. But what you have here is you have this system that you have to be able to go into yourself and say, okay, body, I got to cover the higher frequency. I'm making sure that that gate is taken care of. My mind, okay, I understand how it works, and I'm going to move also these anchor thoughts. Because remember, the mind is also a whole nother dynamic, because it's what causes you to remember what the body has already forgotten. Something the body is like something that happened to get hurt. Then once that heals, you'll even forget where you got that scar. Okay? So what the soul, the mind is the one that's remembering, like, oh, it logged it in here. It's like, oh, that happened because of them. I can't stand them. They put that. You see what I mean? So that's now pulling things down. So that's why in a mental-based reality, you get this kind of trauma happening all the time, especially with just the news. The weapons of mass distraction, as they're calling it now. So, and of course, again, the soul, it doesn't need to know any of this. It already knows this. It just needs to be given its abilities back. See, it's almost like our soul is out of our body, following our body around, but can't get in our body because the actual frequency, and this is what goes on with most people, when they're still on the low frequency, the frequency is too low. So thus, they can't actually get inside of the body. And so, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and take a brief break really quick. Actually, no, there are no breaks. Everything is perfect. So I'll just keep going here. So, again, you have the mind, you have the body, you have the soul, and you have to work in conjunction with these in order to fully lift up the vehicle. And then you'll see it. It'll be very clear to you what you need to do. So I'm going to take it to the table. Actually, I'm going to finish off one more part that I wanted to explain about this when I was going to erase the board. So what you have also is you have these tools of projection. Now, obviously, sound is a tool of projection. Light is a tool of projection. Water is a tool of projection, okay? You also have stone or crystal, we'll call it. Crystal is a tool of projection, okay? And I'm sure I can sit here and think about some more, but just core things that are forming our reality. So let's think about that. Sound, light, water, and crystal. All right? And then let me go ahead and get this camera moved around. Actually, let me go ahead and get this onto the table, so you can take a look at what I have here. Okay. Okay. I'm going to have to get some water here really quick. I may have to even take some toxin absorber here for a second. Let me look at the clock. That's what they're going to love about virtual cleanse, because it's going to stay real all the time. Like, we're just going to keep going through this. Because the reason why I wanted everyone to take a look at the different elements that you use is because you got to pull yourself up from somewhere. I'm not sitting here saying that I've always been on high frequencies and that I'll always stay on high frequencies even. Like, who knows what's going on in the world these days. You just have to understand how to get yourself through every situation that you're in until you become so good at it that you do remain harmonic, meaning it's a natural thing for you to continuously remain harmonic. It's not something that you have to think about. You don't have to think what you're going to eat. You don't have to, all that stuff will be provided for you because you'll be in high manifestation frequencies. So let me just get some water here really quick. Go ahead and check in the chat box real quick here too. And get our camera repositioned. Everyone should have seen me this morning. It was like, I should start recording it and then just putting it on fast forward, but tomorrow I'm going to actually have in the morning, it just, starting as early as possible, I'm going to just take some live feed of the coast here because I can move this camera outside and I probably can put in one of those boom mics and hopefully the lawn guy's not out there early, but you can really get a nice view of the coastline here and just, get your absorb on of Costa Rica's atmosphere. Okay, let me look at my camera. All right, I gotta put it up just a little bit. Okay. Okay, everything looks great. So let me go ahead and transition this camera. And here I am. Okay. All right, so let me go ahead and check in this chat box really briefly. Okay, so it looks like everyone can actually hear me and we're looking good, so I'm going to keep going. All right, so let me just get some stuff out of my way here. All right, where to begin? Obviously, we have a full array here. Actually, let me see what camera's on. I guess my camera's on, so let me go ahead and transition to the actual table. Let me turn some stuff on, too. All right. Let's get this on. All right, so let's let that quiet down for a second. It just has to warm itself up. Let me grab I did put some notes together. Okay, so also remember tonight we're gonna have, let me see, I just need to look at my picture and make sure it's okay. Okay, yeah. So tonight we're actually going to have this live chat going on, and we're going to have that live on here. So if you want to talk about, how it's been going through your cleanse, and you want to get some questions answered, or you have something to add to what's being said, tonight would be a perfect time. We're going to get on probably for about 45 minutes to an hour just before we go to bed, and it'll be just an awesome day 4 evening. Let me go ahead and get started here. Just have to find my notes. Okay, so all I should have to do is that. All right, so how this works is basically, you can see that obviously certain individuals have more control over certain chakras than others. So there could be an extreme root chakra individual, and now we're only talking about in mysticism, but they would have a tendency to use the actual stones, and that's why a lot of what you see going on in the occult world is actually done in stone. You have, of course, Stonehenge. You have, actually, let me get this camera a little bit different. You have Stonehenge. You have Stone Mountain. You have Mount Rushmore, where the faces are carved in stone. And you have, you think of some of the other places. There's multiple places, but you'll see even the buildings in New York. You'll see things being done in stone because that frequency is alive. And I talked about this earlier, how all of the courthouses and post offices in the world are built from the same granite, which is the Stone Mountain granite. And I actually went up on that mountain, and it was some quite interesting energy going on the mountain. And I started realizing that for the lower frequency entities and beings, they tend to work with stone more because that's their wavelength, their channel of communication. So again, as I was explaining before, so you'll understand how these harmonics work. And I think that my head is there. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna have to get down here. I didn't set this up properly today, but it's fine for me. So basically, when you're looking at so to understand how these lower harmonics work is, you have a spectrum, just like you have in the physical body with the crystal kingdom, or the rock and the stone kingdom. Actually, you have the crystals, and then you have other elements such as lead. And then that entire kingdom is arrayed within the minerals. But it's an exact same composite to our world. But the only way to understand how to measure, what is the wavelength and the spectrum of a crystal or some type of object, you need certain kinds of equipment. So if I wanted to test this glass to see what frequency it's actually on, there are very few devices that you can actually buy that can do something like that for you, that wouldn't be like laboratory grade equipment that would need a lot of other equipment with it. If anyone has any information on something like that, definitely forward it to me and we'll see what we can do. But to test what wavelength and what frequency something's on, Humans are generally not allowed to do that kind of stuff. You can see it's that kind of thing going on. So what you would find, though, is you will find that everything is sitting on a specific number. And being able to, as an organic being, change your frequency into that actual frequency or pair with that actual frequency will put you in communication with it. Now, its level of intelligence is based on the actual frequency that it's on. So that's also how it gets with crystals, which we're going to talk tomorrow about. You know, there are seed crystals or crystals that just, let me fix my mic here, it's crystals that just begin or not even expanded crystals. Then you have like these crystals that are pulled from the center of the earth that are containing all of the information of what's taken place on earth up until this point. So it's just like, that's why I was saying that you have to understand how these worlds connect, because that would be just like in our world. You have certain individuals that can really tell you a lot about what's been going on and what's happening, while you have some individuals that are like they just got here. They can't tell you really anything. So you have to see that that stretches out over all kingdoms. And now we're in a stage also where we're observing this stuff and we're utilizing it. So it lets you know that we've already really expanded, because we can take something like this quartz crystal and go and utilize it just like we could take something like a car or a Porsche or whatever and go and utilize it. You see what I mean? So let's get into the frequency itself. So what you really have is you have two worlds in frequency. And those worlds are generally separated by organic and inorganic. And it's very easy for you to see the organic frequencies, because the organic frequencies, let me get some media up here. The organic frequencies are pushed from organic devices, meaning that what's actually used to generate the frequency has an organic level of life. And we'll say organic means, in this case, a part of the nature of this world. So let me take a look here really briefly to my folder, and I'll let you see this image here. It's a gentleman with some singing bowls. Now, of course, metal, let's see how to transition there. Okay, there we go. Of course, metal is an element, is a mineral, and glass and crystal is an element, is a mineral. So what you have is you have organic sound coming from these devices, but these devices being used as the carrier. So remember, what's making the sound is called the carrier. What's bringing the sound to to wherever it's getting, however it's getting to you, that's called the carrier. So one of the things I figured out right off the bat in frequency early was you had to utilize the proper carrier to get the results that you were looking for. And so if you were looking to do anything with the higher chakras, you really needed to use light. While if you were looking to do something with the lower chakras, you really needed to utilize stones. But in each sense, you could find a correspondence in any element to use in that particular center. If that makes sense to you. And what I mean by that is, let me give an example here. Excuse me. Oh, might as well do it there. Okay. So what this is that this is next to the GB4000, you see the MOPA amplifier with a photon light emission tube. And the reason why the photon light emission tube is used is because after you get to a certain level of frequency, you can no longer apply that frequency to someone's body through sound without even doing damage to that person on a cellular level, because the body would in effect be, how can I put it? It would be tensed. It would be very tense because the frequency would be so much for it to take. So, excuse me. So what you have to see here is that when you're dealing with something on a cellular level, light is then applied to affect something on a cellular level because it's gentle enough to actually be able to deal with the cell. Versus sound, in trying to carry that same frequency in, is so
it's still, because it's a low carrier, for better lack of words, then it's going to rupture things and damage things before it repairs anything. So this is why I'm trying to get everyone to see that on each level of your consciousness, there is a crystal that corresponds to the higher state of consciousness. And that crystal can be applied to that area and it will have an effect. However, as a carrier, if you want to affect higher states of consciousness, you can work with other methods such as light and affect in more of a pinpointed way what you're trying to get accomplished in that world or region. And these are just facts based on the actual knowledge of being inside of a body and how things are set up. So now, if you look at sound and how sound plays a key role in our environment now, because of course we listen to a lot of music and we hear sound, and now our ears have been pretty much tuned to another sound, if that makes sense. Let me explain how that works. When you're used to hearing certain things, like right now, you can't necessarily hear the refrigerator, because it's not that it's not making a noise, it's just your mind has now basically checked off that wavelength, because it's like a constant wavelength. And in order for it to get some level of clarity, it'll say, okay, we're not hearing this no more. You see what I mean? So what you have going on, now I need to get some water here. So what you have going on is that the first thing that you would apply, especially using organic methods, is getting your ears in tune. And this is one of the key methods of what you're to do with tuning forks. And it's also one of the most important things that you can do with frequency entirely. And how this works is you simply sound this fork, and then you put the fork up to the ear, and then you listen. And you listen until you can't listen anymore, until you can't hear it anymore. Now I can hear this for quite some time from doing this. And then when you can't hear it anymore, you hit it again and you listen. And you need to structure this as an exercise that you utilize. And what this will do is it will tune your ear to that. It'll allow your ear to actually open up that frequency. And these tuning forks happen to be solfeggio tuning forks. You can find those on Amazon. But what it does is it actually opens up that entire part of the spiral or cone in your senses. And then, there's not many words for what I have to explain here. But what happens is that, especially with the even higher frequencies, then you actually are opening your ear up into the wavelength that is even beyond 20,000, which they say you can't hear. It gets the ears in shape to where they can actually hear that. Some people think that hearing is just audible. Hearing is not just audible. There are things going on that you can't see and can't hear, but the frequency is moving forward. But it doesn't mean that you can't hear it. You see what I mean? It's just about how and what kind of ability you're utilizing to hear it. And so maybe that may sound confusing, but I don't think so. I think everyone's pretty much getting what I'm saying. You also have what's called vortex imprinting. And this is something that I haven't worked with much because there's just so many other methods, especially with the tuning forks themselves, with distilled water, and being able to utilize just these organic tools in dealing with how you apply frequency to your body is great. If you can move into something like light emission, you also have to be in that chakra to be able to be receptive to that light. So it's the same thing. It's like if you don't have this channel open, but something is trying to communicate to you, or you're trying to basically communicate to yourself in that channel, you're not going to be able to hear yourself. So you have to work again with the level in which that you know that you function on. And then you start raising things from there. And that's why as organic life, we definitely need to work with more of what we can feel the vibration to, because we've touched it. So in a sense, you have the tuning forks. You have, and this of course is the Om. You can actually put this in the water. That's not enough water, and it will fire that frequency through that water. Of course, the water is vibrating. And it even feels, you can feel the resonance happens even more when you put it in water. So what I'm saying is there's a lot of things that you can do with the natural equipment. Now, when you want to get into looking deeper into sound and what it's capable of doing, especially with what affects other frequencies cause, then you move into something that can actually project, I believe this is up to 50 million hertz or something like that. And again, you can't hear 50 million hertz. You have to run it across a photon light emission tube. This kind of stuff gets a little pricey. In fact, we actually found one of these on eBay one time for $500, but generally this unit will cost you around $3,000. And I just felt personally after utilizing it that if you didn't have the light emission tube, which is $3,000 more, then you weren't going to be able to take it to the next level. And also, again, if you don't have access to that light frequency, that frontal lobe area being open to a certain degree, then it wasn't going to benefit you much. However, what it is capable of doing, just like any other frequency device is capable of doing, is actually transferring the frequency to you through your hands. And these, of course, are the devices that are used to do that. You hold this and you allow the frequency to be applied. I even had this thing in a fully saltwater tank to see, what were the effects of applying frequency to the entire body. And that's why, again, you never identify completely what the effects were, especially if you're doing a lot of things at one time. But I would say overall, what the body needs most from frequency is the ability to tune its harmonics. And then all the extra stuff you're going to be able to get into because you'll be able to sense what's going on. There's no way to understand the effects of, let's say, 30,000 hertz if your body is not even tuned to deal with 200 hertz. You see what I mean? So there's a lot about what's happening with this cleanse that is also going to get people expanded into higher frequencies from a real level, because it actually allows them to be conductive enough to be able to receive their self from the higher wavelength or higher frequency. And again, we don't want to get into the higher or lower here, because for you fully to understand how the universe works, just understand that each world has its various correspondence. And what you want to be is the harmonic that is actually moving through all of the worlds of yourself. And this gives you complete access to everything with no hindrances. And so you'll actually see that take place in your reality. Now, I also wanted to talk about a little bit what's happening with the music and why a lot of stuff, and let me change up the switcher here. But why a lot of the music and things is coming out with that electronic, I actually have to raise this camera up a little bit. It's coming out with the electronic or synthesized version of sound, because if you notice, synthesize has the syn on the front of it. And syn is, of course, the root to the word synthetics, which, of course, is artificial. And so artificial sound breached the industry quite some time ago, obviously. And obviously, it's not organic. And the cons to that, of course, is that it will restructure your body. It doesn't mean that it wouldn't work on the body, and that's where a lot of people have gone wrong, because they think, oh yeah, if you're using artificial frequencies basically pushed from other devices, then it has no effect on the body. That's not true. The body has already begun to develop a certain field around it that is picking up this Wi-Fi. They said that even in the iridology, they were noticing that what they call the Wi-Fi line, which was basically in the eye, you could see what Wi-Fi was really causing on an overall level to the body. So there's somewhat of interfacing there. And then, of course, with sound, all the sound that we're getting today, like even most sounds coming over speakers and electronics that have been turned into a digital level, that's the only way it could actually get to you in such small packets. Because analog, of course, is very large files, what's called lossless files. So now what you have is you have all these synthetic devices that are also pushing out frequency. And we have to ask ourselves, even with that, is there a spectrum to it? And that's definitely, of course, meaning there's a spectrum to what it's been used to do on a harmful level. Obviously, HARP and different devices like that. There's also devices that are used to run people away. They even have one, you can look it up on the Google, but it's a certain frequency that ages between, I believe it's 14 and 22 feel repelled by, but it's not audible to the ear. And so what this company in the UK was doing is they're selling this to companies who don't want kids out front loitering, right? So you're seeing that frequency has been taken to another level because it has multiple applications, but us understanding frequencies and being able to test frequencies and then being able to replicate frequencies has been a very closed field. Because, of course, frequency, if you understood the entire spectrum, just like if you understand the entire level of anything, it leads you to seeing the truth in everything. So because sound is so close to us and our reality is wholly comprised of sound, of course the true secrets behind sound are just now coming out. So what also happens is that there's a lot of fringe with sound. Just because we're afraid of the whatever we're afraid of doesn't mean that there's not 50 billion hertz out there with entirely different kind of structure running as far as a city is concerned and still functioning on this wavelength, and that our insight into it may possibly be through something that can emit that kind of frequency, which on this earth you would only be looking at the human being that will be able to do something like that. Meaning that if you think about it, there's certain harmonics and wavelengths that are not here. The only being that will be possible, that will be comprised in the level enough to be able to bring something like that here would be an organic being. But first, they would have to be able to simulate it to a certain degree. And that's why there's this big connection with how we came to certain levels of knowledge by running through simulation, meaning that don't think that Earth has been allowed to just act out all the way to its doom. The doom was a simulation. When it went into real play, it was put together to actually survive. And that's why I believe that this big time is coming on us now to gain the access to how to actually do that, because that is what is really written within our future. And so I'm going to do this. I've talked a lot about frequency today, and there's definitely more to share tomorrow because this kind of runs in conjunction with sound. So, with crystals. So it's one of those things that I'm going to have to end up continuing to tomorrow anyway. I do want to let everyone know, of course, we have some equipment here. If you have any questions about that, you can either ask them now or you can shoot me an email and I can send you back any information related to it. I also wanted to talk about very briefly, again, there is as you see here, there's a synthesizer board. And what that allows to happen, let me see if this thing is even tied in. Yeah, I think it's actually tied in. Let's see. Okay. All right, sorry about that. Okay, I guess that thing is tied in. So what we have going on now is that I've been noticing that it's actually possible. Let me see. It looks like everyone's kind of hearing that, so I'm going to let it just run its course because it takes a second here. Okay, there it is. So it's possible to run the frequency, just a standard function generator into a synthesizer and then actually match the frequency and then run the frequency across the entire tracks, or run multiple frequencies across music. And so I think that people should really start working on creating their own music. Not only can you put vocals to that, you can actually do a lot with, again, with the frequencies that we've already explored. You can also use tuning forks to pipe in live audio. And of course you need just something like a simple soundproof room. And you take a mic, something like one of these hot mics, they say is like a boom mic, basically a mic that has a lot of gain to it, and then you actually can record these frequencies yourself in your own home. And some people may not want to go through all that trouble, but trust me, if you can walk it all the way through, it benefits you in so many ways. You go ahead and take a sample of the sound, and then you run that sample across other things that you know that you listen to or whatever, and you can actually start comprising your own frequency tracks. And then as you're moving through the frequencies, like I said, you'll have more of an intuition of exactly how to work with frequency and getting more familiar with it. Because as I said, It's not a visible world in many sense, unless you're looking at cymatics and things of that nature. It requires your intuition and your sense to kind of know exactly what to add and what not to add. And then you have to be really sensitive. So, of course, that's what this is about. It's about picking up the frequency, cleaning out the organs so that everyone is a lot more perceptive of what's going on around them and also what they're interacting with. So let me look in the chat box here. Okay, so it looks like, actually, let me sign into the chat box. I didn't notice that, but it looks like my computer has logged out of Skype. So I'm going to check with the Skype chat box really quick. If you have any questions, now would be the great time to ask them. I did answer a question in the chat box last night that we missed. I'm going to take a brief moment here. Actually, no, let's see if we have any questions, because I remember last night, it seems like everyone was really content. Okay, so I'm asking now if you do actually have any questions before we meet again tonight. You can ask them now. Someone said, what about crystals growing at specific frequencies, or is this being covered tomorrow? To grow crystals, of course, there's different methods. I actually have a crystal that's been growing for quite some time, and it was just, that's how it came. And you can find crystals like that. And so, yeah, I guess that'd be something that we should cover tomorrow. And the question that should be asked, because I have that crystal here, but it's been growing these smaller quartz crystals on top of it. And so I'm sure, like I said, to be able to affect mass now with sound, you need a carrier. And this is what I'm going to introduce tomorrow. It's like, so what carrier do you use to affect mass with sound? And you think about that, and you say, okay, well, mass has to be penetrated. So what happens with sound is sound generally hits mass and then it bounces right off, because it doesn't find any, well, in this case it'd be a hole. It's very easy. It doesn't find any holes that it can fit in, so it just bounces off. So it needs something like light, which is smaller, a lot smaller, and then light finds the hole and goes right through. And then it starts to pierce through, and then it can get all the way down to the cellular level and then pierce the cell, meaning that actually affect the cell on its emission. So part of this experiment tomorrow, and I got a couple pieces of equipment, and there's going to be really no way to test it except for with the organic body. But part of the experiment tomorrow is actually to be able to look into ways of putting frequency into, we'll start with stones. And then we'll start theorizing with it and look into how frequency could properly be applied to the body. And we'll just walk through it step by step, though, rather than just, going to grab a book, because there's tons of books on it. But we want to understand it, or understand it, as I always say, from a level that we can see it's applied and we can see it actually work. So, of course, any ideas on it are definitely welcome. A person asked how to determine the quality of crystals when looking into purchasing them. Now, generally, what you have is you have museum and weapons grade. Yeah, weapons grade crystals. No, but you have museum grade crystals, which will generally be a lot more darker and a lot more richer. And now, sometimes when a person is selling you crystals, they won't even show you the actual crystal. They'll just tell you how much it weighs and what it looks like. And this, of course, is why there's a benefit of looking or going to get the crystal yourself. So if you're physically in front of a crystal, you can tell a lot more, because especially if you're already in the kinetic frequency, when you touch something, you'll feel there's a response in your head if it's giving off enough energy, meaning you'll feel a physical popping in the region of the head and the frontal lobe, etc. If you don't feel that yet, we're not saying that you're powered down or anything, but the reality is that the conductivity between that area, which is the ethereal area, needs to increase. And this is also how, this is what this cleanse is about, because a lot of those things that we pulled out in the water, get around the glands and actually not only toxify the glands, but also calcify around them. They become like an egg. And that there becomes basically a barrier around the gland where the gland itself can't expand the way that it would normally expand until it cracks that shell. So let's see here. Okay, it looks like everyone, let me see. Someone else has a question. Is they would like to know if you only listen to analog music, organic music. Honestly, I don't even have time to listen to much music, to tell you the truth. Like, I'm always doing something, and I do have a tendency to not remember to even put on the recorder. But when I do, I generally turn on some piano stuff. Like, there's always, I pull down so many of the torrents. Over time, I've collected a decent amount of music, and I just sometimes let that run in the background. It's like ambiance music. But personally, I don't really deal with at all the electronic music and things like that. A good friend of mine was big into electronic music. And hold on, I did have some equipment cut off here. So I had a friend that was really big into electronic music. So while I was around him, had opportunity to listen to a lot of it. But personally, I think that if you're just talking about sound, if sound is not structured and then it's fired at someone, then it's actually going to damage their field. There's going to be no way that you can crank sound up to, let's say, over 100, 200 decibels and then fire it at an organism and think that there would be anything that beneficial that happens to that organism. So let's get that clear. Also, what I'm seeing though also is that if we got it up to 200 decibels, it's not going to be like if you ride a track, meaning that I'm sure there's a way to conduct a track through frequency that actually takes you on a trip through your chakra centers. I'm sure that a person could expand with that track so much with different sound effects and things like that. It could be like a journey if the person is listening to it. And it's all about layering also, because when you understand how many levels the human body is actually put together with, you may choose to use crystals, you may choose to use some type of metal, some type of tuning fork, and then you may choose to finish it off with some type of air and other elements that you have to add in to the track, and to blend it all together, you're going to have to use some kind of processor. You see what I mean? So I'm just saying that when you put something together, if you understand just this universal knowledge, then you know how to layer it. And if you're bridge building, and here's the key, so if someone's asking me, so what are you saying? Are you saying electronic music is good or bad? What I'm telling you is that the good or bad thing is going to have to go, first of all. And what I'm also saying is that if you're a bridge builder to the electronic world, meaning that you're working on getting the people that listen to trance and electronic and are just numbing themselves out into a better state of consciousness, what you're actually going to do is you can compose something that allows them to be able to say, man, I like how that's put together, and it's got that same beat that I like from that other song. And then it starts to say, hey, maybe, but I still like this organic sound over this synthesized sound. Like, do you hear the harmony of that instrument? And that's another thing. There's a lot of instruments such as the hang that many people are not familiar with, but the sound in itself is very, very nurturing sound. So there's a lot of instruments, a lot of sounds. Another question here says, for those of us that are stuck listening to others' music at work all day, how do we rebalance? Personally, it depends on what your job is, but if I know that there's a lot of feedback sound coming from the reality and I just have to deal with it, at times I'll suppress that sound. And some people have done that with noise canceling headphones, but most jobs you can't wear headphones, so you have to stick a little bit of earplug in there and take it down a level, especially if you know you don't have to actually interact with anyone, you're just there at the desk. And again, for if you actually have to listen to their music, obviously you would have to see if you can get them to start listening to other musics by bringing in the best of the music that you want to listen to. You just, you have to work with it. Okay, so another member has actually posted some links in the chat box, especially if you're there in the virtual cleanse, to some of the music that they've been doing, which is awesome. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to take this moment because Obviously, I've been on the computer thing for a little bit today. It is the 4th day. I do have to refresh myself just a little bit. But I want to tell everyone that this has been awesome. We're going to continue with this. I'm going to leave things set up remotely the same way they're set up now. Tomorrow, we're going to get into rejuvenating crystals. I think that would be the first thing, because it looks like to me that everything around us has been drained of its energy one way or another. So to understand the principles of rejuvenation and vibration, we can start with some of the simple objects that are around us. So that's by all means what we're going to do. Okay, so that looks like that's all the questions. So we'll be talking later. I want to say wholeness and balance vibrations to everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Virtual Cleanse. Based on one of our frequency devices here telling us it wants to be cut off. So what happens is that we're going to talk about mass today, since someone says, okay, I'm hungry. Okay? And then we're going to also talk about this ethereal. All right? People have different, we'll spell it like that today. Some people spell it with AE or whatever. Okay, so what you have here now, let's take the body. Okay? And this is about as much as the drawing you'll get out of me. And then down here you have what is known as the mass frequency. And up here you have the ethereal frequency. Okay? And the center of the body is the navel. Okay? Which is slightly above the waistline. So what happens is that how frequency works, because we're talking about frequency today, we're going to have to talk about light on another day. We're going to be talking about crystals tomorrow. Well, what happens is that with your body is seeing through different eyes, like my shirt is. And these different eyes see on the plane or frequency that they're actually on. And I'm not going to be able to put numbers here for people today. If you want to go by solfeggio, you can go by solfeggio. Really, you have what's called harmonics here, harmonic wavelengths in spirals. So each chakra that you're talking about, let's take, for instance, this chakra here, all of the wavelengths that create this chakra, and then we'll just say, let's start from 128 hertz and go all the way to, let's say, 1080 hertz, okay? Let's just say that. That will be one whole harmonic wavelength, basically one world, one layer, okay? And then when you get to the next chakra center, you have numbers, if you understand music, that are on the same octave, but the numbers are different. So this may be 568 all the way to 2,513. Who knows? Like I said, the numbers is not going to do you as much justice as just understanding the concept of what you're talking about. So because of that, this eye is allowed to see into this world. So if a person is primarily this chakra, no one knows, is supposed to know about what goes on in the other planets. They cannot see that far. See, there is, of course, an agenda on the planet where the entities are saying, well, humans cannot see that far. They must be debased. They must not be given the vision, the third eye. They must not be given the tree of life. They must not be given, all these rules and structures and all that, which are basically killing us. So either way, it would either be a slow death, or, of course, this is a mental death, and that feeds over into a spiritual death, because you really can't die. You can be, again, limited or debased or lied to or etc., tricked, etc. So let me just get into this so you'll see how when we project, we utilize the material that we have access to that works with that frequency, meaning that down here in these frequencies, there's of course 2 minor chakras in the knees, obviously chakras at the ankles. Chakras are wheels, so wherever you find bends at, there would be a chakra there. It's kind of like, it really makes a lot of sense when you start thinking about it. There's even popping in the chakras. Like, these are the worlds within worlds. And, even when you take the face and you just remove the head, this is one phi-based skull with different worlds and things inside of it. So there's a lot of power to what we are if you understand it. So this is also what happens when someone has activated a lower chakra and they can see into the mass world, right? This is where they're seeing it. And so anything they predict is going to be from the physical mass material subject to decay area. So you also, of course, have the individuals that see from the ethereal level, okay? And then, of course, most of what they predict is very expansive and enlightened and sometimes not even realistic if you're actually primarily into this state of thought, right? So this is also why, just as the ideas from these individuals down here don't make sense to this individual here in this state of consciousness, we were even told that we had the ability to run circuits, that we could run through worlds, basically. That's what all the knowledge ends up revealing after
the live stream itself to actually catch up. And yeah, it's an amazing day. I feel great. I got up really early this morning to start working on the project. Let's see. Okay. Okay, I'm just actually testing sound here. So if everyone could let me know, and we're just going to take a minute to get the show started today because obviously we're a little bit, well, I won't say we're late. There's not any set times for the shows here that we're going to have in the future. It's just going to be based on how fast I can get things together and hooked up and ready to show everyone because, of course, I want to do very comprehensive studies on the topics that we're going to be covering. I also want to get some light going on in here, so give me just a moment. Everything looks clear, so it looks like you'll be able to see things properly. Let me go ahead and get this other camera shut on. And again, I'm going to notify everyone in the chat box that we have started, or Keyshawn, if you could do that, that would be great. And then we're going to give a moment for everyone to just kind of get on to the actual live stream and to get tuned in. So let me get our recorder started. Okay, now you should be getting audio in 2 ears, and I'll just figure out how I'm going to deal with that mic in a little bit because that's a mono mic. Okay, so can everyone now hear me in both ears? Let me, okay, great, awesome. What I did do is I actually installed the thing that's going to allow us to do group chats. We're going to begin that tonight. Obviously, I'm going to have to figure out how to get my audio off of mono, but I'll just throw in another mic and we'll be able to handle it like that. So again, let me start this by starting everything with a video. But before I do that, because we're definitely going to get deep into frequency today, I'm going to go ahead and let everyone know what they should be doing on their cleanse. Obviously, I'm on day 1 of 5. A lot of people are on day 4 of 5, so at least we're now on that same segment. And of course, all the information is the same, which is that we'll be taking these toxin absorbers the first time you wake up, and then after that every 3 hours, so it's good to set a timer. You'll also be taking your digestive stimulator number 2 hours after your toxin absorber tonight. And of course, for those who are using the best option, we've now gotten rid of food, so you'll be juicing. So if you feel the urge here, make sure everyone can hear me. Also, let me make sure this recording is on. I can hear myself. And let me just look in the chat box and turn this on. Let me just look in the chat box. Okay, you'll hear a little bit of reverb for a second there. I just had to check to make sure that we're actually recording, because you know it happens sometimes. It happened yesterday when we were doing the big water test. So what you're dealing with here is now you're understanding this hyperdimensional being, because this being is really a universe, and universes within universes. They were telling you about this whole, what they call a holographic nature, where each part contains the image of the whole. And so on each level, you got levels of entities of different intelligence existing in harmonics, and then that completes one world. So what happens is you have multiple worlds. Now, some people say you have 7 worlds, and this, of course, is the basic, this solar system template, which gives you a moon, a sun, and 5 other planets. That's the other people need to think, that the 7 days of the week are not just 7 planets. Actually, it's one planet, one moon, one sun. Of course, that's Sunday. For anyone wanting to understand how am I coming up with this type of theory, this is Monday, or the moon, and this is the sun,
And then twos and wins, and anybody that does this stuff, astrology or whatever, they can tell you all the days, and we have charts. But you understand how it works. So the actual ritual that is being conducted here on the planet is in this sevenfold structure, but that sevenfold includes the moon and the sun. And if you understood the other names for planets, like let's say, for instance, Neptune, if you understood the real element to Neptune, then you would see it as elements like the sun. See, you understand what the sun does because you seem to need that the most, because it's in your external reality and it gives you heat. So you know what a sun does, right? And then with moon, most people who do vegetation and crops and things like that, they know what a moon can do. But do they know what a Neptune or what a Saturn or these other planets can do? And that's also called the hidden mysteries. They love it. No, that you're not getting enough energy or etc., then now you're going to have to refer to the juicing options. Probably tomorrow we'll be juicing a couple things just to mix up some stuff that people can stay nourished with and also may not taste as bad. That just keeps them going along the way. And of course, those who are on day 4 or 5, you're going to do the exact same thing that we're doing. So that's pretty much what we have for just what people need to be doing with the cleanse. So let's go ahead and get this first video started, which is basically a quick TED Talks that most people have heard already, but it's in regards to cymatics, because of course we're talking about frequency today. I have a couple more things to get ready in the studio, so it actually helps me out because I can show this while I'm finishing up a couple things. So let me just see where that outlet is. Okay, I found it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch to that, and then when we get started, everyone, we're going to be talking about exactly what's here on the table. Let me show you a quick image of that. And so you can see we have some weapons grade frequency devices and also some standard frequency devices. We have a Shalandi plate, some vortex imprinting, some tuning forks, etc., and even some synthesizers. So we're going to be talking about, the pros and cons of organic and inorganic sound, the limitations, the carriers, etc. So we're going to get into it on a deep level. But like I said, I just need to prep up a couple things before we get started, mainly some of this equipment. Okay. All right, I was able to get everything set up. It's been quite interesting. If you could see the front of the studio right now, you would see exactly how much stuff is really out here and how many things have been plugged up since this morning. It's interesting how many wires and cords and cables and stuff that has to go to all these different devices in order to get something like this to work. All right, I was just checking in the chat box here just to make sure everyone's still connected. Someone says they're feeling really hungry. And again, that is the battle that you face with the body, which is getting the mind over matter actually in place. And of course, we're going to talk about matter here and the mind over matter. So this will take your mind off of the hunger. Because remember, what happens is with the body when it makes its demands, that's going to be